There it is.
Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night. Do you feel the wall of sleep, the scales across humanity, eating at our souls? Do you feel it, Wham?
You know I do. Tonight I do. Tonight I really do.
I don't know. It's just like energetically something just feels off lately. Like, I don't know. I don't know what it is. It's just the world.
The planet is getting ready to eat us.
I know. It's definitely like
the planet is done. It has reached its done point.
There's even times I've tripped out. I had Robert Duncan on, this ex-CIA guy that made some kind of technology, and the government like stole it from him to electronically harass people, like target individuals. And I know that stuff can get goofy, but there's some truth to it too. But that show, like, actually, the way I feel lately is like I'm paranoid about that. Like, I think, am I on a list, a gang stalking list or something? Like, something just feels crappy all the time. Hopefully it changes. It's 96 out today, and there's like, I go outside to the mill and there's like black flies everywhere. It's like the plagues of Egypt outside. Like, there's like a gazillion of them everywhere. They won't. I'm spraying them. They won't go away. It's like something. I think it's Ragnarok. It's the end. Kiss your ass goodbye.
Well, you know what they say about Ragnarok? First, it gets really hot because the fire giant Surt from Muspelheimr, the realm of fire, comes and burns the earth. And then and then we have Fimbulwinter, which is 3 years of winter, and that destroys the world. So whether that means there's going to be a nuclear winter or there's going to be some kind of, I have no idea. But
I mean, just going to the mailbox is painful. I felt my shirt, it was like it was on fire. Like, just going, it's a pretty good little wall, not anything too much, but it's hot as hell out there. Like, it's not like we need to start going underground. It's like Vietnam outside. But Florida always sucks, but it feels worse. Like, it takes your breath away. It's so hot. Like, you can't even hardly breathe out there. Then, of course, everything's on fire.
In Canada.
In Canada. Yeah.
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. A beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Almost. I checked this morning. As of this morning, there were 482 fires burning in Canada, and 280 of which are 240 some of which are out of control.
Crazy.
I know. The total amount of acreage burned is larger than the state of New Jersey.
Oh my God!
Burn, baby, burn! I'm kidding. But some penguin for you.
Stunning.
The return of Mike Hacker and all this chaos. He has come to save us.
I don't know about that, but I'll do my best.
Well, what he'll do at least is he'll do a really good job of narrating the end.
There you go. There you go.
A really good job of narrating the end. The world is caving in, and Michael Hacker is just talking about it in narrative terms.
Yeah. In your profession of audio booking, do you ever run into any of these like Ed Kemper serial killers that audio book? Probably not, but interesting question.
I've never run into an actual serial killer. I don't think. I've come close, but not really.
I've heard him narrate before, but I've seen articles about it and stuff like that. I'm just surprised they let him do it, really, but I guess, whatever. But
there are, you're talking about Edmund Kemper, aren't you?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. He used to do narrate books for the blind. I don't know if he still does it or not.
Definitely interesting. I didn't know about him until that Mindhunters David Fincher show. I didn't even know who that was until I saw that. But tell us the name of your company and give a link out, and then tell us a little bit about your audio booking. It's fascinating. How long have you been doing it? And tell us a little bit about it.
Well, my company that I do the paranormal stuff through is called Et in Arcadia Audio. And the website is michael-hacker.com. And you can find all of the titles there. They'll link you to the books where they're available for sale and download on audible.com. And you'll also find, if you go to audible.com, you'll find the books that I narrated by John Keel, Brad Steiger, Jacques Vallée, who that's my most current book, and Gray Barker as well. So I've had a long
and 2 books of mine.
And 2 books of Wham's. Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. Mysterious Beauty and the Lovecraft Quartet.
Yes, final season, the Lovecraft.
Final season, that's right. That's right. Which was brilliant. Both of those books were brilliant. I enjoyed reading them very much. Thank you for hiring me.
Oh, and let me tell you, you did a great job on both of them. But when I think I may have told you this in an email, but when I heard those stories in final season actually done orally, it was like they were almost different stories to me. I mean, you do such a good job. You find the right tone for them, and I remember listening to them and going, "These came out of me? How bizarre!" I mean, it's like how strange, because they were like it was clear to me that they needed to be read out loud.
Yeah. Well, they were beautiful, and it's amazing how that collaboration can make something just seem so fresh and new. Yeah. So,
and the book is done a lot better on Audible. I mean, I've sold a whole. It's for some reason that book has always been more popular in the UK. I have no idea why, except I guess Lovecraft's a big deal in the UK.
Right.
Who knew? But it has started to sell again, so that excellent. I think that's excellent.
Right. Well, and this will give it a boost too. So
yeah,
it's great. Yeah. So you asked me how long I've been doing this. I guess I started in 2014, around there, almost 10 years. It was something I had started out in acting in theater. I'd done a couple of movies, and I had just kind of withdrawn from theater, and yet this new industry of audiobooks had kind of popped up on my radar, and a friend of mine was involved in it, and I had just moved to Los Angeles, and I asked him, well, how would you get started in this? And he said, well, go online and look up Pat Fraley and Scott Brick. And if they're going to be hosting a seminar, go. So I did, and they were having one the next week. So I got a membership, and I went to the seminar, and I got my feet wet, and it was great because they gave me, that seminar included demos, which is really what you need to get started.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I put my demos out there, and on ACX, which is Audiobook Creation Exchange. And within a week, I had my first job booked, and I just went from there. So it's been great. When I started doing the paranormal work, I thought, well, there are all these writers wanting books on ACX, and I'm not really interested in just reading anything. I really want to, focus on this one area of the paranormal. So I got online. I started communicating with this guy named Andrew Colvin, who was publishing all of
Yeah. Uh-huh.
yeah, he was publishing all of John Keel's books and some of Gray Barker's work. And so I asked him, none of these are available on audio. Do you want to do audiobooks? And so he thought about it, and we did the first one of his, Flying Saucer to the Center of Your Mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that has really sold very well. It's one of my best titles. And then we did about another 8-9 books together. John Keel and Gray Barker, The Silver Bridge, Men in Black, Our Haunted Planet.
Yeah.
Just a whole bunch of them. And then his own edited collections of Keel articles. Those are a lot of fun to do.
Aren't those great? Aren't those
Yeah.
articles great?
They are wonderful. And what a great service he's done. Because when you think about it, and this is when I'm reading stuff these days, and I say, well, that was thought of by John Keel 40 years ago.
Yeah, I know. I
So-
know. I know. I know.
It's like that. It's all being rediscovered. So, and then I started my company when I got in touch with Brad Steiger. He was a friend of my father's.
Mm.
And Brad Steiger had about 180 titles and no audiobooks. So I contacted him and I said, you remember me? I'm Darv's kid. I grew up around the block from you. I'm doing audiobooks. Do you want to do audiobooks? And he thought about it for a while and he decided, sure, let's do one. And he had just published these ebooks, it's real stories about such and such and such and such, real stories. And so I decided to do the first one in that series, and that sold like crazy. I couldn't believe it. And then I wanted to do Revelation, the Divine Fire, which was a personal favorite of mine. It was more a labor of love. And so I did that book. It unfortunately has not sold all that well, but it's still selling a couple of titles a month, that one. And then I also did Christmas Miracles, one that he had done with his wife, Sherry.
Mm.
And they've now both passed on. Sherry actually passed away from COVID last year. So,
Oh my.
yeah. So anyway, and then I did a book with Mike Cleland, The Messengers. He put me in touch with Jacques Vallée's publisher. So I negotiated some rights with those guys. And so I've just recently come out with his Alien Contact trilogy. Dimensions, Confrontations, Revelations, which is selling extremely well.
Well, and those are sort of that's sort of his classic trilogy in some ways.
Yes. Yeah. I was just thinking about that today. I went back and, kind of listened to it a bit to get me in the mood here, sort of. It's interesting. His voice is so different than John Keel, who is very much tongue in cheek and very witty and wise, and Vallee has a sense of humor too. it's not like he's totally serious and stoic all the time, or dry. He has a very ironic tone. It's it's a lot of fun, and trying to get that flavor of it is a ton of fun. His books are full of foreign languages that I had to research. The worst was confrontations with the Portuguese.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh. I mean, all of it, half the book takes place in Brazil. So I have it's so funny, how your resources will pop up in front of your face sometimes. So I have a friend who is an interpreter at the Mayo Clinic, and I asked her, "Do you know anyone who speaks Portuguese?" And she says, "I just happen to know someone who speaks Portuguese." She put me in touch with this guy. He was in Sao Paulo, so he was actually Portuguese. And so we went through the entire book, sounding out the words. He made me repeat after him, and oh man, quite an ordeal. Portuguese is not as easy as Spanish, I'll tell you. So that was fun, and I learned a lot in that book. That book, kind of the frame of that book is sort of the the mystery of Vintem Hill with the lead masks, the two guys that were found fully dressed, dead on Vintem Hill.
Oh yeah. That is like a strange story.
Yeah, very. So I guess Vallée went down there. He talked to he did field work. He was there. He talked to as many of the original witnesses as he could find. It's quite a, after having done that book, I watched a couple of YouTube videos on that case, and there are, I trust Vallée. He's a scientist. Mm-hmm. He knows how to research. He knows how to talk to witnesses. And I would think that his version of it is probably the closest to what really happened as you could get. So if you're interested in that case, I recommend this book highly, Confrontations.
Right. Yeah, that's of those three, that's my favorite of them.
Yeah, cool.
Because he deals with cases that sort of fall outside of the kind of contact narratives and cases like this one that are troubling.
And I think part of that, and he mentions it in the book, that the people he's talking to, the other big case that he discussed is Panorama.
Right.
These folks are farmers. They are rural people. Most of them have never seen a movie in a theater, much less Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I mean, they have no really cultural framework to put all of this paranormal in context with. So when they talk about something called a chupa, which is like a refrigerator-sized UFO, right. I mean, there is no correlation anywhere else on the planet for that. So I think that the cases from South and Central America are the most interesting, really, in that sense. There's no sense that they're being influenced by any kind of cultural paradigm.
Right. Well, you remember the movie that he was involved with, Witness of Another World, right? Do you remember that? It was a movie. It was a documentary that Jacques Vallée was involved with.
Did he narrate that? Is that the one he narrated?
He narrated it, yes,
Yeah,
and it involves a contact that was experienced by a guy who was a young indigenous person, and was that in Brazil? I can't recall.
That movie made me cry at some point.
I mean, it's like one of the most intense stories because of what the only healing that this adult, after having had this experience, the only healing he could find was to go back to his people, because they had the spiritual remedy necessary to heal this incredibly whatever it was that happened.
Trauma.
Yeah, the trauma.
Okay.
No, they were speaking Spanish, so maybe it was in Argentina where this occurred, because they were speaking Spanish. They weren't speaking Portuguese. I recognize Portuguese because it's got a lot of Arabic loan words, so it's like, and it sounds different than Spanish if you put them side by side. But no, if I don't know if it's possible. I purchased Witness of the World when it was available on Amazon Prime. I don't know if it still is, but if any listeners get a chance to watch that documentary, I think it's one of the most important UFO documentaries out there.
It's good.
It's incredible. That, and I don't know if you're familiar with this one, Michael. Capturing the Light, the story of Dorothy Izot.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
I have the book too. I have the book as well. Yeah.
That one, that is incredible. And her story is incredible.
I just brought her up with Bobby Dizzle and Wild Trees that last show. Yeah.
Her family is, she only recently died. She only died in like 2020 or 2021 or something. She had to have been over 100.
Yeah.
But her family's in the process of trying to figure out what to do with her 30,000 feet of film of all of the stuff that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, they have this huge archive of stuff, and they want to archive it, and they want to put it together, but they're trying to figure out like what to do with it, because they want to be very careful with it. It's like, because she tells the story in that documentary, if you've seen it, that Hynek came and saw what she was doing and told her to stay away from the UFO community.
Oh, yeah?
Because they, and this is in the 70s or 80s, it was before he died, because, he said that they'll just tear you apart. And they'll try to do all kinds of, they'll try to convince you of one thing or the other, and what you're doing is too important.
Well, that makes absolute sense. And, Vallée does some of that in the Revelations book as well.
Right.
He criticizes how certain witnesses will be taken and hypnotized by people who are incompetent hypnotists, and how abused witnesses and recipients can be by the community. Yeah.
Yeah. So she basically remained silent and just did her stuff and collected all this stuff. And now her family is trying to figure out a way of doing it that will preserve her approach.
Right.
And yet still make it available for people who will be respectful with it. And that's really hard to do.
Yes. She passed away.
She passed away. It was not long ago. It was not, she had to have been over 100 years old, because when they did the documentary, which was back in like, I don't know, the 2000s,
Right.
she was in her late 80s then.
Yeah. I remember that documentary. They're interviewing her daughter.
Right.
They've got the camera facing the daughter, and there's a window behind the daughter.
And the light appears.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
And they analyze it, and they can't explain it.
Yeah. I thought, wow. I mean, as a documentarian, can you imagine having that? That's like gold.
Right. Well, and then if you remember, it wasn't just that thing appeared behind her out, and the window was open. So it couldn't have been a reflection in the window. Right. It wasn't just that. There were some orbs that also, when you slowed everything down, there were some orbs that appeared that sort of, one came up and actually entered her.
Yes.
It entered her right here. And when she was talking, of course, she wasn't aware of it. And I mean, it's like, oh my God. And just some of the pictures that she had, it reminded me so much. There is a book that, if you were to get the rights to it, I really wish that you could do it.
What's it called?
It's called, well, and I did like 3 blogs on it. Hold on for a second. Let me get it. It's on my shelf right here. Project Identification by Harley Rutledge.
Okay.
I don't know whether, I mean, his family, his kids still have the rights to this book. So I don't know if they would be interested in letting you read it. But and this is a more technical book. This, I mean, if you want to get the specs about it, you can. My blogs will give you that kind of information on ProfessorWham.com. But and it's a scientific study, so there's a lot of scientific information in it. So it's not like but there is a narrative in it, because what ends up happening is he explains the kind of study that's happened in the mid 70s. He explains the kind of study that he wants to do. He's a trained scientist at a small state college in the Piedmont area in Cape Girardeau in Missouri. Okay. And they were having a UFO flap. And as a scientist, he was just interested, and he thought it was maybe a natural phenomenon of some type, right? Sure. So he actually describes the kind of study that he wants to set up. They have some, that will involve witnesses in different areas, so that they'll be able to triangulate lights as they come over, and he does get some of that data, but really, 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 really quickly. As we know, when the phenomenon starts to be observed, it starts to change. Yeah. And what ends up happening, and of course he doesn't know about this, but what ends up happening is it follows him home. And he and his family over the next decade end up having, they don't have any contact experiences as such, but they have these interesting interactions with, and not only he, but his wife and a bevy of other observers. Right. I mean, just the statistics are impressive. Yeah. But he's a scientist. He doesn't attempt to answer the question as to what's going on there. He doesn't attempt, and I talk about this actually in Mysterious Beauty, which you narrated. But this to me is like one of the most important books ever, because it's a scientific study. Yeah, from somebody. Yes, and you can actually get it on PDFs now, right? You can get like a PDF copy of it.
It's on archive.org, so, and I know on there if someone disputes that, he has to take it down, but I guess no one has. So
Yeah, you can get a free PDF of it. I can send it to you if you want.
Okay, all right,
And,
that'd be great.
and that
The
way,
book is like hundreds of bucks now on eBay, which sucks.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, when I purchased that copy, it was I had just finished Mysterious Beauty. I was talking to my Pine Bush contact, who I'm still in fact, he and I are trying to arrange a study of a haunting at a gym that I go to. So we're actually still in contact. But he's the guy who reminded me of this book, and so I purchased it back in 2019, and I paid $65 for that book, and now it's like what, $200 or $300 or $400 for this book. But I can send you a PDF of it.
Yeah.
I also
remember that gym. I remember that gym from your book.
Yeah, and I also have with the same guy that reminded me, C. Burns, that reminded me of project identification.
Yeah.
He also sent me this huge folder, and this, if you're interested in this at all, a huge folder of research that a woman did on kind of background of Harley Rutledge, and some of the ongoing research that's been done since him, and so that there's that information too. But I mean, just in terms of the book, so that you can try to. I guess it's possible to contact his son or one of his sons with the family, and if there's any way they would let you read it. Because it's such a great book, because the narrative is very subtle. It's just in the process of him studying it. You know what I mean? The narration of the relationship between the phenomenon and himself emerges over time, and he only later in the book does he kind of become aware that there's something going on. But it's completely out of his control. It's fascinating. It's really cool. It's very cool.
I'm really fascinated by stories like that, where you feed the ghost and it follows you home. And
all you do to feed it is watch it, pay attention to it, look at it. That's all that it takes.
Mike Cleland talks a lot about that too.
Oh, look, the little cat head is in.
Yes. What's her name?
Charlotte.
What a sweetheart.
Okay, go ahead, Michael. I'm sorry, I got all excited.
I was just going to say, cat videos are one of my favorite things. So.
Oh, yes.
She is so funny. You can pick her up from a chair and move her, and then she'll just put in this really smooth, like little kung fu hit, trying to, get you. As she's falling back as you move. I'm always doing that.
I love it.
A little smooth.
Yeah, I found this great meme. Today it's a picture, it's a photo. Somebody had like this big model Dalek. You know what a Dalek is? A big model Dalek that's been opened up, and the inside of it has been made into a cat bed, and so there's a cat sitting in the middle of this Dalek, and the caption reads, "Now, you know that this is the truth behind these guys." So the intelligence behind Daleks are actually cats.
Yes, completely.
When I worked with Andy and had to transcript a lot of John Keel, like read it, those articles, I was the fingers doing some of that stuff, and I actually had to. And the Bigfoot book and the Probes Happen again. We did some books that are transcripts from the radio show. I had to type out that stuff, and I will never do it again. Like I hit a door when I was doing that Bigfoot book, and I don't know, hitting walls and stuff. But oh man, but it's weird when you trace over Keel's words like that, isn't it? Did it feel weird when you read it? I mean, what's that process like? You have to be careful. Was there a lot of editing with that kind of stuff? And then it's like, background noise and stuff like that you're going to deal with.
Well, Yeah, you can't have background noise at all. So anytime you get something bleeding through like that, you have to do a retake. So them's the rules. You just have to deal with it. I loved reading Keel. It's interesting how good writing is easier to read.
Mm.
Uh,
Kind of duh.
What kind of program do you use to record this stuff? Is that something you could tell us, or is that, I mean, what do you use?
Sure, I can tell you all about that. Whatever you want to know. I use it's called a digital audio workstation, a DAW, and it's a program specifically for the Macintosh operating system.
Mm.
It's called Twisted Wave, and I like it because um, it's so simple to use. I mean, it's just like using an old cassette tape deck. Play, record, stop, rewind. Um, it's not like using Pro Tools where you have to know how to use a mixing board to do it.
Yeah.
Um, so I've been using that now ever since I started, and I love it. It's you pay a fee once, and you're in it for life. Really, I do send donations every once in a while when he comes out with an upgrade and stuff like that, because you get the upgrades free. It's just an amazing program. I can't speak highly enough about it. Lots of people in the audiobook industry use it. Other popular programs, I'm not going to talk about those. So I have a home studio. Right now, it's in a walk-in closet that I have treated with sound-absorbing foam and blankets, and then I have a Neumann microphone. It's a TLM 102. I really love that one. I also have a couple others, but that's the one I use mostly. Yeah, so in order to do this kind of work, you have to have a home studio. You don't have to spend tens of thousands of dollars, but you probably have to spend a couple $1,000s to get going with it. You have to have a computer, you have to have a DAW, you have to have a microphone. In order to digitize the audio, you have to have a digitizer, which is like I'm trying to remember the name. There's a special name for it anyway. Focusrite, Motu, Solid State Logic. Any of those will do it for you. Focusrite is good starting point.
What is it? Usually an MP3? I mean, what's the file that's created? Like that, you have to give the Audible and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. So you're going to record into a WAV file. Which is
a WAV file.
Yeah, and then once you're done recording it and editing it, and then you master it and create an MP3 file. So the WAV file becomes an MP3 file, and that's it's a bit rate.
Going too deep with this.
What's that?
It's like going too deep. We're going too deep with it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But, okay. No, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah. No, I'm glad you did. I was just curious. I was curious of some of that. That's why I asked. But What are some future things that you're wanting to do or work on? I mean, is there anything you can talk about? What are you looking at? Are you ever going to do any horror? Any horror?
I have done horror already. I did. I have a close friendship with Lisa Morton, who is a past president of the Horror Writers Association. I did a book with her earlier this year a collection of classic ghost stories, which is really good. Some of my best work.
Nice.
And that's all fiction. You know, it's like classics from the 19th century. You know, Poe and Ambrose Bierce and
Nice.
you know, M.R. James and Henry James and Edith Wharton and all those folks. Hawthorne. And that was a ton of fun, that one. And let's see. There are some books that I would really like to do. There is one called The Beast Reawakens. It's by Martin A. Lee, who is a newspaperman, a journalist. He worked in San Francisco. I think he's still there. And that's not out in audio. I would love to do that one. It's chock full of footnotes, though, so I don't know how it would work. But it's all about the history of the neo-Nazi movement from the end of the Second World War through to the present, which was then 1995. It hasn't been updated since then. But it's definitely a book that charts the whole history of the neo-Nazi movement in the United States. And it's fascinating because it goes back and it's like this weird anti-ordination, laying out of hands from Hitler's bodyguard all the way through to,
I looked it up. It's pretty weirdly interesting. Will it put you on the watch list?
What's it called?
I'm just kidding.
It's called The Beast Reawakens.
The Beast Reawakens.
Yeah,
Okay.
I looked it up, but I saved a picture of it to look up later. But definitely, it's a trip for sure.
It's fascinating, and it is a narrative. So, but there's so much juice in it, and it's really with the rise of the right wing. I really think it's an important book. It's really important. I want it to be in audio. So
yeah, I mean, to me, it's kind of like, I haven't read this book, but I'm familiar with that idea because Peter Levenda has written some stuff about that, and
yes,
and a lot of different. There are a lot of different authors who've sort of traced different angles of this.
Yeah.
But to me, it really is about a kind of, it's more than that. It's a deep-seated kind of worldview.
Yes.
And in fact, I've had this, I've done interviews with friends of mine who are like magicians, and we think of it as being like a kind of egregore thought stream kind of thing. It's like, in other words, it's sort of through concentration, it has sort of developed its own kind of reality on a certain level. And
I agree with that.
And there's a power to it
Mm-hmm.
because of what it promises.
Yes.
It promises order. It promises certainty. It promises to relieve you from fear by utilizing your fear as kind of a fuel.
Uh-huh.
It's very powerful.
Yeah.
And people should not underestimate it.
That's exactly right. And I look back on my own growth and knowledge, and I realized that for years I ignored it completely. Even though I was living in the Pacific Northwest, and the order was up there at the time.
Right.
We were blind to it, and
Right.
and that's why I think that book is so important to kind of let people know that this is not an overnight thing. This has been going on for decades.
Well, and the people who are in these movements, they are true believers.
Mm-hmm.
They're true believers in the same way. Well, and a lot of their interests intersect, not all, obviously,
Uh-huh.
but a lot of their interests intersect with certain facets of of certain evangelical Christians and certain aspects. This is part of what fascism's power was, is its ability to co-opt certain elements of capitalism.
Yes.
And wed that. This is why Nazis think of themselves as the third way, because they grew up with this dichotomy that you and I were taught, Michael, about capitalism versus socialism.
Right.
Well, Nazis conceived, and so did Mussolini, but the Nazis articulated it more fully. See fascism as the third way beyond socialism and capitalism. Right. And so they blend elements of both, but the trick is it's the nation itself, however the nation is defined. The nation itself becomes the religious ideal.
Right. And it also becomes the recipient of the socialism.
Exactly.
The workers unite to protect the state rather than
than than their own welfare. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's I don't know how familiar you are with what is it? Vin Diesel's character, the Furion. What is the
Pitch Black?
Pitch Black. Right. Well, there are things about those movies I like, but there was a movie that came after that was like a sequel,
right?
To the Chronicles of Riddick. Yeah. And if you watch, there are many things that are wrong with that movie, but if you listen to the way the necromongers, they're not necromancers, the necromongers. If you listen to the ideology of the necromongers, it is exactly fascism. Yeah. It could be taken right out of Mussolini. In fact, I'm not sure it wasn't. So it's like, if you want to know what fascism is about, watch this movie, because even though it's got a lot of other problems, it's articulated very succinctly by the leader of the necromongers. It's terrifying.
Who is played by Colm Feore, a Canadian actor of great talent.
Yes. So, Vin Diesel is not a great talent, but he's. But I kind of like him, and
I think he's fine. I like him. I haven't seen every movie he's done, but I've enjoyed it in most of the things I've seen. So
if I buy that Nazi book, will it put me on a watch list?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm kidding.
Listen, I'm already on a watch list. I
have some weird book about Nazis in the occult called Hitler's Monsters or something. A friend sent it. It's one of those that you want to read it, but you're kind of don't know if you want to go in that direction right now. But I have it up there. I have a lot of books like that.
I've read so many of those books.
Yeah.
The Morning of the Magicians is another one that's really good.
What's it called? Morning of the Magicians?
Oh yeah, and that one's a classic because that one kind of sets the general background tone.
Yeah, The Morning of the Magicians by Powles and Bourgier,
something like that. Yeah. In fact, I started rereading that not long ago because I needed to look something up in it, but I could not remember where it was. So it was like I ended up, because I'm old and I can't remember things. I used to be able to remember where stuff was, and so now I have to go back and reread the whole damn book in order to.
That's why I like everything electronically, so I can do searches.
Yeah, exactly. That is the power of that.
Yeah,
that is the power of that. You should see if you could do an audible book of that, of The Morning of the Magicians, if it has.
I think it's been done, but it's definitely in the public domain at this point, I'm sure. So you could just do another one.
Yeah, because it's an interesting book. It's also well written.
Yeah.
It's very well written.
Well, because it was probably written in French, you would have to work out the details with the translator. But
Right.
So maybe you could just Google translate the entire manuscript and then read that.
I don't know how well written that would be.
I know. That would be
Google Translate is sometimes kind of okay then.
So, let's see. What other books? There are a couple of novels that I would like to read, but I'd rather not mention those titles in case someone else wants to. Yeah. But you mentioned Peter Levenda, Wham.
Yes.
I am like fascinated by Peter Levenda. And,
his stuff is so good.
I think that his Sinister Forces would be a great audiobook.
It would.
It would take forever to record, but it would be. I think it would work really well in audio, and of course he's writing novels now too. Those would be fun. So.
Well, and he's got his Hitler trilogy, and then he's got some other occult stuff, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
His most recent one is Rites of the Mummy, which I haven't.
Oh, is that a novel or a?
Hold on, let me look real quick.
The last thing I bought of his was a Lovecraft third book.
Right. I just got those. I haven't had a chance to read them yet.
Oh, here it is. It's Rites of the Mummy, The Purla Cell, and the Secret Key to Liber AL by Jeffrey Evans and Peter Levenda. I've only just read it.
Okay, so it looks like it's...
See, okay, here it is. I'll just read you the inside cover. Okay. Over a period of several years, Jeffrey Evans, the former head of Kenneth Grant's Typhonian Order in the United States, conducted a bizarre sexual ritual with elements of Thelema, Lovecraft, and the Egyptian mummification ceremony to unlock a mathematical code buried in plain sight in Aleister Crowley's Book of the Law. A follower of Aleister Crowley's Thelema since his teenage years, Evans had an encounter on a bridge over the Potomac River with a being he identified as his holy guardian angel. This being provided him with the inspiration to begin a series of rituals incorporating Egyptian and Lovecraftian elements in an effort to traverse the tunnels of Set, pathways on the dark side of the Kabbalistic tree of life. So basically what this is, it says here, and so he did this, and it resulted with his wife Keenan. These are sexual rituals, which resulted in a series of revelations concerning the mathematical code hidden within the verses of Crowley's Book of the Law, the circumstance that Crowley always suspected but was never able to prove, not even with the help of accomplished mathematicians. Evans tried in vain to demonstrate this code to other members of the Typhonian Order, to no avail, but a chance meeting online with Peter Levenda resulted in Levenda's taking a closer look at the data, and what he discovered astounded him, and he agreed to help bring this discovery to the attention of the general public. So basically, it's that what this does is this work brings attention to the existence of a sacred geometry within the verses of the Book of the Law that bridges the gap between Thelema, Freemasonry, and Templarism, as well as Gnosticism, and demonstrates a continuum of esoteric thought spanning millennia.
Oh my!
And the reason I got it was because he has all this stuff in here about Schwaller de Lubitz, who of course is kind of this background interesting person who was really very influential in the development of certain ideas that you find in books like the Key of Knowledge, the books of Enoch, Key of Knowledge, which influenced certain aspects of the New Age movement in the 1970s and 1980s. But Schwaller de Lubitz is also like this rabid anti-Semite, and the links there between that kind of occultism and some of this Nazi stuff.
Yeah.
You
Definitely.
know, so
I'm always amazed by those anti-Semitics who are into the Kabbalah. It seems like
yeah.
it just seems so weird.
Well, and what's really weird about it is they think that they can get away with doing that by like going Egyptian or something.
Yeah,
but what they don't seem to understand is that Egyptian stuff, especially really traditional Egyptian stuff, it comes out of the same. It's in the same language family as Hebrew.
Yeah.
They basically are African languages. So we're talking about like African stuff,
right?
African stuff that and Middle Eastern stuff. It does, a lot of that stuff does go back to like the beginnings of civilization, but it's not white. It's just not, okay?
Right.
It's not white. It's not European. They need to stop.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
And that just drives me crazy. It's like it's kind of like this old canard. Christians are constantly trying to call themselves, the whole British Israelite thing, that the real Jews are white people and the people who call themselves Jews are pretenders. And it's like,
right.
All these civilizations were happening when Europe was like the third world part of the universe.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry that we all feel so insecure that we have to try to grab onto other people's stuff and say that it was really started here.
Right.
But, it's okay to borrow things. I don't have an issue with borrowing things.
No.
Just understand what you're borrowing.
Yeah.
And that you're borrowing.
Yeah. I gotta look into that book.
With this Rights of the Mummy? Yeah. This is new. Let me see when it was published. It didn't come out that long ago. Let's see here. It came out where did you go? Yes, 2021. It was the end of 2021. And as evidenced by my pile of books, I'm only just starting to read it. So I've got like a huge pile I'm working through.
Well, I wonder what bridge that guy was on when he had his encounter with his holy guardian angel.
Well, it was across the Potomac.
I know. My sister lives on the bank of the Potomac.
Well, if it was going from D.C., it could only be a certain number of bridges.
Yeah. Well, if it was in D.C., then yes. She lives right on the West Virginia side, across the Potomac from Sharpsburg, Maryland, where the the Antietam battlefield is. So.
Oh, and that is a place. Have you been to that place?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that is a place. I took my mom when I lived in Maryland, and she came and visited me. My mom has this thing about the Civil War, and she, I don't know if she'll ever accomplish it, but she wanted to visit every major Civil War battlefield before she died.
Yeah.
And so she came and visited me. This was like 15 years ago. And I took her to Antietam because that was one she'd never been to. Uh-huh. And I tell you what, there's something about that battlefield. You just get very quiet.
Yes.
It's haunted. It's haunted there.
Yeah. My sister lives in Shepherdstown, which they had a TV series called The Ghosts of Shepherdstown.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a haunted village. Lots of various paranormal stuff going on in there. I've been on several ghost tours there. It's very interesting. If you're in the area, go visit. It's just really exciting.
Right. And it's so much death happened in that area in such a short period of time, so much suffering.
Yeah.
That, it's intense.
Yeah. They were saying that when one of the churches was being remodeled, they tore up the floorboards, and they discovered underneath the floorboards all of this blood from from the wounded had been brought there as for hospitalization and stuff, and the floor, but beneath the wooden floor was just covered with blood.
And it was still there after all
Yeah.
this time.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it wasn't wet, of course. But
No, right. But I mean, it might be that they just like it just dripped through, and maybe they
yes,
just.
that was the implication. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, let me see other books. Oh, there are a bunch. Right now, I'm working on a book with Bill Kasulis. Excuse me, I mispronounced that. Kusulis.
Chrysalis.
Yeah, and his wife Jackie on the Silver Bridge disaster in Point Pleasant.
Oh yes, I've seen that book. I
Yeah.
haven't read it yet, but I've seen it.
It's pretty good. Most of it is transcribed interviews, so it's you just get a feel for the person who's talking. You get a because it's not an authorial voice. It's the voice of a person who's a witness essentially. But it's a new challenge. I've not done. I mean, I've done little bits of interviews in past books, but this book is mostly that. So it's got its own challenges.
So if I remember right, it's like what a book of surviving witness
Yes,
testimony about what
people
happened.
who were alive at the time of the bridge collapse, and basically the theme of the book is how going through trauma can let me start again. When you've been through trauma and learned to overcome it or integrate it into your personality, it's called post-traumatic growth, and that's what this book is about how people come to grips with growing through trauma psychologically. So it's interesting. I shared with Bill that I had seen a documentary. It was actually on Disney Plus. It was part of their National Geographic part, where they were exploring similar issues in Eastern Europe, where people had been through terrible trauma during the communist years, and how people were much less anxious having been through that trauma in their lives. It was interesting.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, trauma does interesting things to people.
Yes.
We've had them on the show. It was a really good show, and that book is really good. So I'm glad they're having some success with it. It's really good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've had my own experiences and think I have some PTSD from it on some levels. I had a weird thing, and I haven't told this story yet anywhere. I don't think I told it last week. I don't remember. But I had to drive recently to an airport to pick up a car, and I don't like going an expressway and stuff like that. But as I was driving, I remembered a UFO thing that happened to me with some friends in a car, where it was over the car and we all saw it. It was just real weird. Like, it was low and it was almost like it was there to interact with the car. And anyway, I'm driving and I hate it. I'm on the freeway. I can't stand it. Like, there's idiots everywhere. And I start thinking about that. And then suddenly I'm thinking about seeing the car inside of a UFO and all my friends in it and gray aliens around. So I'm driving and I start to go off the median a little bit over the edge, and it's like, and then I come back, and then I'm like, well, I don't think that really happened, but why am I thinking it? Is it my imagination? I know the UFO thing happened, but I don't really think we got sucked up in it and we were knocked out and gray aliens came. But then you're like, well, maybe it did, but I don't. And deep down, I don't think it did. But it wasn't the best thing to be thinking about when you're driving on the freeway. Like I felt really weird, like I needed to pull over. Like it made me sick. It made me feel sick.
Yeah.
But do I know if a car got sucked up in a ship and taken to whatever? I don't think it did. But why the hell am I having these weird ass thoughts? But we did see the UFO. Like I've had a lot of UFO stuff where you see it over you, and it's weird, but you don't know if you were taken. I don't think I have been, but you always wonder it. Like people want me to get hypnotized and crap. I don't really want to. Seen that Jacob him up, David Jacob recently on the show, and I had to tell him about Emma Woods and stuff like that. Like you better look that up a little bit more. Don't get hypnotized with that situation. Might wake up in a doggy suit somewhere in an S&M factory in underground city. But definitely, you got to be careful with the hypnotizing. But we've had Peter Levenda on, and he said something weird about me taking the Mabus name, and it created a thought form that drains me. And sometimes that feels about right, but I'm not sure exactly what he meant by that. But he's a trip, though. It's definitely good.
Yeah.
And he's been on before, and I'd like to have him on again sometime. It's been a little while, so.
Yeah. Well, he's fascinating. I've seen a couple of lectures that he's given on YouTube. He's a very good speaker as well as a writer. So just into some really weird crap. So
you should narrate the Necronomicon Simon book and open the gates of hell. I'm kidding, but that would be
actually, there's a book that Simon wrote called that's about his discovery of the Necronomicon. You know which one I'm talking about? I can't remember exactly.
Like a smaller, like there's several of those little weird paperbacks that there's like a spell book and
it's which one? Let's see here. It is.
Those books creep me out. I have them and I keep them in a box. Like
is it this one? The Dark History of the Necronomicon?
Yeah, I think so.
Is that one?
Yeah, Dead Names.
Dead Names. That's it.
Yeah.
That one would make good audio.
Yes, this one would, because it's the history of it.
Yes, and anything that basically has a story connected to it is good audio. It has to have a story. You can do a cookbook in audio, but I mean, who's gonna? I mean, I don't. I just don't think it makes for good audio.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason why I mention project identification, even though it's got a lot of technical stuff in it,
right?
It does, because he gives you all of the specs of like all the scientific things that they're using, the equipment that they're using. And this is like in the 70s, and the experiments they're doing, the measurements they're taking, but all that's happening within a context.
Yeah.
And he gives you that context too.
Yeah.
And so that's how this narrative emerges out of it. It's really, I mean, you can tell when he was writing that at certain points he was just like, oh, you know what I mean? It's great, Yeah. But no, you have to have an audible thing. You have to have a narrative of some type. It's true.
Of some kind, and it doesn't have to be very deep, but something to hang it on, I really appreciate it when a book is well written and there's a voice,
right?
Because that is your way into the book is through the voice. And when I'm preparing a book, I'm looking at the book. I'm doing several readings of the book. I'm trying to figure out what the tone and attitude and point of view is. And it's remarkable how different John Keel, Brad Steiger, and Jacques Vallée are, even though they're all writing in the paranormal field. but they're all very different voices. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I know, and that, yeah, and I can imagine that when you're starting to narrate, that you kind of probably feel that voice in you,
Hmm. Yes.
you know.
To the point where I do get criticized sometimes for when people think I'm making fun of what's going on in the book, but no, it's just the sense of irony that I'm feeling when I'm reading certain passages. Um, a good writer will let you know, um, although it's not gonzo, it's definitely through the filter of the writer.
Right.
So, yeah, I
Well,
love
the one thing I was going to ask you about Jacques Vallée in particular
it. Hmm.
is that, we had, I mean, I know that you know what he sounds like. We have recordings of his voice.
Yeah,
And so to read a book in his, I mean, you're not reading it in his voice,
I'm not doing an impression. No.
literally, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. But I'm sure that you're having heard him,
Mhm.
well, and having heard Keel too, because there are recordings of the man.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure you've listened to them.
Mhm.
That the way that they talk and express themselves does influence how you read.
Right. It does. And, but really it's the words on the page that are the primary road mark, signposts that you
Hmm.
use to get your handle on the substance of the voice. Um, and it really is a thing. Um, and once you find it, man, boy, it's really powerful. You know, that's why I think audiobooks are so important and why they are so popular. Um, you have a voice, and the voice is primary, and it's and a good reader is going to find it. Um, yeah, I'm thinking of like um, Brad Steiger. He had a very very resonant, deep radio voice almost. Um, and then of course John Keel was much more trickster god, I think, in a way.
Right.
Yeah. Um, so, uh, yeah, I just have gotten a very deep appreciation for people who collect information, and like John Keel, he was very much of a Fordian
Hmm.
at the beginning of his career, where he's collecting all of these informations. I remember that one flap from 1966 where he charts the incidents from like like Montana all the way down in a loop through Missouri and up through Iowa and Illinois, and how he's able to collect all of that and make it make sense in whereas if you are there in, say, Newton, Iowa, all you're getting is that one story, but he's
Right.
managing to connect it to this entire flap that goes all the way across the country. It's remarkable.
Yeah, well, and he describes how he did it. He had all these news clipping services,
Yep.
and he just spread that stuff all
Yep.
over his apartment.
Yep.
And
Yep.
and basically what he's doing is he's talking about creating a database.
Yes.
A database that then you can look at to see the meta patterns of
Right.
these things.
Exactly. And he was the first to do it.
Yeah, he was the first to really try that. I mean, that's what inspired me to that inspired me why I organized Mysterious Beauty the way I did. And I talk about that. It's like, because you've got this thing happening down here, and at the very same time, down in Orange County, that this is happening, almost 100 miles north, up in Kinderhook, something else is going on at exactly the same time.
Yeah.
But they don't know about each other.
Right.
And then what I've noticed is that the sightings just kind of cycle around like that. And they're still doing that. They're still sort of like, we've been having fireball sightings not too far from where I live again. And there's been a cluster of Bigfoot things up north, and it's just weird. It's kind of like, what is that about? And people are still not looking at that larger picture, but once you know it's there, it's really difficult not to think about it.
Yeah. It's remarkable. That, of course, we're just kind of, talking about what brought us to this field. I mean, it's just really, it does raise your consciousness,
Yeah. Keel is the gift that keeps giving, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, indeed.
He's just amazing.
I was just talking to the guy that owns Visible Ink Press, and they're re-releasing a Brad book with Nick Redfern, a werewolf book that's pretty interesting. I was trying to get Nick on. I don't know if I'll hear anything back from it, but they have a lot of good books. If you ever want to check with them about anything, Visible Ink Press. I know they do a lot of paranormal, all kinds of different books. But
is that Patrick Huey?
No, that's anonymous. Robert Janaki about us, but it's called Visible Ink Press. That's the site. And I know Nick does a lot of work, and I know Brad did. And
he did. In fact, I did. Yeah. Well, never mind. I was going to, Visible Ink
Press.
Those guys are great. They also do videos down too, don't they?
Oh, no.
I think they do. I'm not sure, but I thought I saw them. No, reality books or they do a lot of UFO stuff on YouTube.
Yeah. Small Town Monsters does a lot of the documentaries. I've had them on before. They're really good, but they just put out a new one about a Dogman Triangle in Texas that was trying to get that guy on, but they put out a documentary about it and a book. And then, of course, Bruce Hallenbeck just put out his book that we had him on. Was that book Kinderfield?
Yeah, the Kinderhook Monster.
Yeah.
No, the Kinderhook Creature and other stuff.
That's Small Town Monster.
See, I have this book over here. It's
Small Town Monsters might be a good place to check about that. They're putting out
Creature and Beyond. He's a guy that I featured in my book as well, and when I interviewed him at the time, I encouraged him to write his own account because he's such a good storyteller, and so he did finally. This is the history of his
weird blob encounter where a lot of people saw a blob, but some other person saw like the Virgin Mary. It's weird. Like his favorite story as he recounts that is that two of his cousins, there had been this blob that had been recurrently seen on their property, on his grandparents' property, and he had actually seen it like a couple of times. But one time, two of his cousins saw this kind of a bluish bell-shaped blob kind of come at them from like a hill and chased them both, and they ran into the house, and one of them just saw a blob and the other saw the Virgin Mary, and the one who, and it correlated with how they'd been raised. So one cousin had been raised a Catholic and the other cousin had been raised sort of a loose Protestant. So he saw something, but he didn't see the Virgin Mary.
It's amazing how that works sometimes.
It's weird. He's also a Hammer horror like historian.
Oh yeah, he's like the hammer
That's awesome.
horror guy.
Need to get him back for that sometime.
Yeah.
Sure. Well,
See, this is what the blob sort of look like, according to his book. This is what the blob sort of look like.
Can you show me the cover of that book, Wham? Bruce Hallenbeck. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
He's a great storyteller. He really is.
That's Small Town Monsters' first book they put out. And then they just put out one called Dogman Triangle or something. I was just looking up something about the origin of the Blob, the movies. It's from a guy that wrote something in Weird Tales a long time ago, Brennan or something, Slime or something. Just a weird thing earlier that I looked up. I didn't know we were going to be talking about the Blob, but it's from a Weird Tales magazine. I guess he wrote it for Weird Tales, and then here it is. What was Brennan's most successful story? Slime was Brennan's most successful story. It began as the Weird Tales cover story for March 1953, and apparently I guess that kind of morphed into the Blob and weird other stuff, like all kinds of stuff like that, but just a weird background on some of this Blob that people are seeing. This Blob creature, this Morpheus creature, the Blob. But I wouldn't mind reading that one from Weird Tales, though. Weird Tales just came back out as a new magazine. I'm like way behind on it, but they just did a big one. Mike Mignola and Hellboy and all kinds of stuff like in that universe. The whole magazine's like, I guess, people sharing stories that are kind of Hellboy-ish or something. I know Hellboy's on the front of it, but they just restarted Weird Tales, and I need to get up on that, but I keep forgetting to do it. The new Weird Tales. I'll have to check out the horror book. How do you get to all your stuff exactly? Is it the profile on Audible, that horror book's on there you mentioned too?
Well, you can go to audible.com and do a search under my name, Michael Hacker, and it'll list all my titles. Now you'll also get titles having to do with computing. So once you see that you've got a book, that's narrated by me, by Jacques Vallée, there's a link. My name will be active, and you can filter it down by just pressing that link.
Nice. So, did you really like The Flash? I saw that on her Facebook. I haven't seen it yet. I want to see it. I know it's by the guy that did the It's.
I loved it. I'm sorry, I loved it. I thought it was great. I mean, it was thrilling. When Michael Keaton shows up, it's like, this is exactly what I needed right now in this moment. It's so good. And really, I know that Ezra Miller has his reputational
that is really weird. I haven't seen The Flash yet, but I want to see it. I haven't seen it.
I won't spoil anything, but there are just so many Easter eggs that will really reward a fan for going, who has been with this character throughout. I mean, it's really great, and there are a couple things that are just really stunning about it. I thought that Ezra Miller's performance was terrific, and unfortunately, I think his box office is kind of going to doom his career here, but I think that the film has been really underrated. It's just been really getting bad box office and bad reviews, and I don't understand it. I thought it was terrific.
Well, I know it was really good. I've seen that, and then what was that guy's first movie, Mama? It was a weird horror movie. I saw that.
Yeah,
Those were really good.
Yeah.
Have you been? What do you mean that you have like a Flash fetish, or you collect the comics and stuff? You've been with Flash that long?
Oh no, more Batman.
Yeah, me too. I've never disliked the Flash, but I've never actually bought a Flash comic. But I have a lot of Batman. I just got involved with that DC event Night Terrors that's coming out, which
Sure.
it's a big event where it's going to affect all the comics. It's kind of like a horror story that they're doing in the comics, but my comic stuff has had to calm down. It really is like insane. There's just so many titles.
I
And
know.
then it's like a drug. Like you got to say, okay, I got to quit this shit.
Yeah.
It's too much. There's a new Conan the Barbarian coming out. There's a new freaking Cobra.
I know, when they're $4 a pop, you can't. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
I remember Batman comics costing $0.25.
Right. I was going to say between 50 and 75 cents is when I was buying them. Yeah.
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 Oh boy.
I'm into Batman too. I have a lot of the graphic novels and a lot of the stuff from the Joker newest comics that was James Tynion and Joker War and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I get a lot of the Joker stuff. I like the Joker.
Yeah.
Joker. But definitely, I'm going to see The Flash.
I remember when I was buying comic books back as a kid, I was buying Tomb of Dracula. That was a
really
marvel. That was a marvel. But also Phantom Stranger was a DC comic. And I collected that entire run. It had been done earlier in the 50s, but this was the run that started in the 70s.
Phantom Stranger. Okay, I see. It's 1972.
Yes, that's it.
I
It went
found
for 40 years or so, and then they discontinued it.
Yeah, it's interesting if you look on eBay at some of this stuff. Like it's Phantom Stranger #1, and someone's trying to sell it for $2,000. Like there's crazy stuff. Like
You're kidding me.
cool. Yeah, it's on there. It's like someone's bidding. He's gonna go get it. It's on there for bid. Phantom Stranger #1. I just saw it, but are you gonna win the bid? The bid. What is he?
I back in the 90s, I sold my entire collection for $45.
That always sucks. I've had some stuff like that happen before. Yeah.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, Daniel, who's been on the show, his dad works for the Pentagon, like has one of those crazy comics, like I forget which one that's worth like $500,000, like Superman or some crap or something that's got locked up in his house and is worth like $500,000 or something, like some of those comics. I found one today that I actually had to get called Minor Threats, and it's by Patton Oswalt from Dark Horse, and it's a weird superhero story that kind of focuses on the villains, but it's called Minor Threats. You know, the comedian Patton Oswalt.
Yes.
He was involved in it. It's actually got really good reviews. That's one I'll jump on to read when I get it.
Yeah.
It's called Minor Threats. But yeah, I don't know. One of the big DC things I'm really interested that's coming is that Creature Commandos. You know, they're supposed to be doing an animation of that. But when I first heard about that, it took me forever to find the graphic novel of that, because it's like all these weird, like they were in issues of like weird war tales and crap. But basically there was one graphic novel that came out of it. Now they've re-released another one since they released it. But basically it's Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Wolfman on like a World War II team killing Nazis. They're like a government. They're like a government experiment, and but the graphic novel, I actually found that finally. The first print, it was like, God, I forget. It was like $50 or something. But I'm not even going to bother with the original issues. I don't have that kind of cash, but I just wanted to read it. Just wanted to read it. But I know they're doing an animation of that. It sounds pretty interesting. And
yeah. Well, it's here on. You can get it. It's IDW Publishing. You can get it through Kindle though, if you want.
Yeah, Creature Commandos. It's pretty interesting. It's fun for sure. But I know it's weird how movies do that, because I see a lot of people like talking crap about the Indiana Jones movie, but I looked on Rotten Tomatoes and people are saying pretty good things about it. There's a few that are Rotten Tomatoes, but it seems like any movie lately is hard to get into the 100 zone for these snobby critics or whatever. Like,
Right.
they rip everything apart. And then are they being paid by other movie corporations to rip it apart on purpose or something? Like,
Yeah.
you wonder weird stuff like that. Like someone's
Right.
taking bribes to go after it.
I mean, to compare the Flash to Aquaman, I thought the Flash was 3 times better.
Yeah. And there was an interesting Batman comic that came out. What was it? Batman 72 or no? It was Batman 87. It was a continuation of the Tim Burton Batman movies. There was a comic that came out where they took on the whole tone with the Michael Keaton Batman and everything. It's like whatever year those movies came out, it's called Batman that year, and they did a little series not too long ago. It's pretty good.
Right.
But it was a continuation from the Tim Burton Batman movies, which I love those, and I like the new Batman. That was good. That Paul Dano did an excellent job as the Riddler guy.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
I need to see that. I've heard great things about that.
It's definitely good.
But that's kind of what the Flash is about, is the DC multiverse.
Right.
Did the Jack Nicholson version Joker show up? Because I heard something like that.
Yes, but
lips sealed.
wait till they get a lot of me.
So have you yourself ever had anything paranormal happen at all, ever?
Only once, when I was driving across the Mojave Desert, I thought I saw a UFO, daylight sighting. It was a silver sphere. It was way up high. And then the next thing I noticed was I looked back up, it was gone. But I felt like I was being observed. It was this really intense feeling.
Let me tell you, a friend of mine, Ted Rowe, Ted R-O-E, he owns NARCAP, a UFO situation or organization. Very reputable dude. Him and somebody, I believe he was with someone, was out in that desert, and Grace took them, and he's told that story. They came out and grabbed him and took him. They came out, grabbed him, and took him somewhere.
Oh.
And this dude is like the most coolest, reputable dude ever. Ted R-O-E. And that story is bone chilling when he told it. So be lucky that they didn't, or maybe they did. No, I'm kidding, but could have been worse out in that desert. That's all I'm saying with that, because he's told that story where he said Grace came out and basically, I think he was with a friend, and they just like took him. And this dude's like the most down to earth Hawaii. He's in Hawaii. He's friends with old Vanny, and like the coolest Buddhist dude. Yeah. He actually had a crazy encounter happen there that they came out and basically grabbed him and took him. It was what led to him making that whole organization. So there's definitely stuff that goes on in that desert. So any missing time?
Wow. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, I just talked to him not too long ago in an email. I need to get him on again. It was a good interview for sure. So what do you do on the we got like 10 minutes or so.
Okay.
We end at 5 till. But so I mean, what kind of books do you read for fun? Like what particular authors? I mean, and does doing all this audiobook stuff make you do that less? Because like for instance, for my job, I'm on a keyboard all the time, so it's like someone gives me a book to read on my computer or whatever. I'm like, ugh, I don't be on my computer. Like I'm on my hands are swollen from the stupid job I'm on all the time.
Well, when I read a book for fun, I'm listening to it. So I guess in the last year or so, I've really gotten to be quite fond of a British author named Adam Neville. Have you heard of Adam Neville?
I have.
Yeah.
I have.
He wrote The Ritual that was made into a very well-received Netflix movie.
Yeah.
But short stories are amazing. I just am really a big fan of his. Um, sometimes you have urban horror, and then you have like rural horror.
Mm-hmm.
The Babe in the Woods. The Ritual was rural horror, whereas I think he has this amazing talent for horror in a near future that is really apocalyptic, and it's very, very unnerving. Um, in the most recent book that I read of his, the short stories, he did a couple of experiments of short stories with no characters.
Ooh,
How did that work?
ooh. No, actually, that sounds really cool. What's this guy? No, Neville. What's his last name? First name again?
Adam.
That's right. Because I have heard of him. I just haven't read him yet.
Yeah.
So hold on.
The Ritual is a Wild Norse situation. You would like that?
That's right.
So Norse.
Yeah, and it was really great, but they really stripped out the entire subplot with the Swedish death metal.
Right.
There's a whole subplot with the Swedish death metal rockers.
Well, I'll have to read it. I know I have some his books here, but I never got around to it. Publishers send me stuff. So
Is that his book, Last Days?
That might be. Let me just
it's the most recent one. It's the most recent one, and it was published in February of this year. Let me see here. That
title doesn't.
That's one of his books. It says here 2012.
Hasty for the Dark is really good. Weird and Other Derelictions is great. Those two I've read. I've also read Some Will Not Sleep. So I've of the 5 collections that he's published, I've read 3 of them.
Okay, Before You Wake, Before You Sleep.
Before You Sleep, 3 Terrors.
3 Terrors.
Hasty for the Dark. Hasty for the Dark, I think, is the one that
Selected Horrors. Hasty for the Dark. Ooh, that sounds good. And Weird and Other Derelictions.
Yeah.
Oh. I love this kind of horror.
I think Weird and Other Derelictions is the one with the short story with no characters. Let me just double check that.
And there is an audiobook already.
Yes.
That's been done.
Oh, Weird and Other Derelictions. The whole collection is stories with no character.
Oh, so all of these are
all of those stories have no character.
I must.
No plot and no dialogue. It is amazing. It's really great.
That sounds stunning.
Yeah.
I mean, and the reason is that since I've written Final Season, there have been ideas for stories that have come up, like dreams that I have and stuff. And some of them have been kind of like that. They're stories without characters. Or if there are characters, they're odd characters. They're not like characters that speak.
Right.
And but I haven't written some of them down because I didn't know how to legitimate them in my own mind.
Well,
so it'll
this
be
might
nice.
give you some ideas. It's
very nice. Very nice.
It's basically telling story through mood and atmosphere.
Right.
It's a real tour de force, I guess. I mean, it is what it is. It's unlike anything else I've read. It's really good.
Well, we got about 4 minutes. Let's get your link.
Okay. Let me get the link up.
How about choose your own adventure audiobooks? You go forward to our if you want to go left. I like
Okay,
those
here we
books. I
go.
like those novels. Those little old choose your own adventure paperbacks. Go ahead.
And
See, I just love to have this kind of a conversation where all we've done is talk about cool books and authors
yeah,
and the paranormal and horror. And
I know, isn't it great? It's like it's a movable feast.
it's wonderful.
It's been a great show, and I appreciate it because I feel kind of crappy. So y'all have done a great job in carrying my books.
Well, stay away from those Three Musketeers.
I know, right? I don't think I'm going to eat those again ever.
Okay, so everyone, go get the Valley books from Audible.com. They're Audible exclusives, so that's the only place you can get them. And if you do read them, please leave a review or a rating. I would really appreciate that. It really helps the publishing house, and I really hope you love the books. If you have any questions, you can reach me through my website, www.michael-hacker.com.
And if you have a book that you want him to read, contact him.
Yes,
he's great to work with. He meets his deadlines. He's not expensive. I mean, I don't think you're expensive, but I think you're very reasonable. And he's a lot of fun. So
I appreciate that, Wham. I echo everything you just said back at you.
well,
You are
thank
great.
you.
I loved working with you too.
Hopefully, we'll do more work in the future. That's my goal.
That would be great. All right, guys. This has been great fun. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
We love talking to you.
We appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Next week, Sunbow True Brother. This dude acts like he's just chilling out with Sasquatch. Got some Sasquatch, a friend of Kawani Laparitis in that collective. So, Quebec. So he said something about dinosaurs and Bigfoot in the past hanging out. So I don't know. I guess we'll find out, right? William's ready. Ride the dinosaur. Wookiee's own dinosaurs next week. All right. Everybody have a good weekend. Thanks for listening. Good night.
Take it easy.
I smell hamburgers. I got to get them. I'm starving. All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye.